So since the Battlefield 6 reveal, I've been looking for this particular type of video, which by the way, since the Battlefield 6, all of the stuff has come out, the channel's been doing really good. You guys have been really enjoying the Battlefield 6 content. So if you want to stay up to date on everything video games, you like the kind of content style that I do here where I give you my opinion on everything, be sure to subscribe. We're trying to get this channel to 100,000 subscribers. My goal is by this year, by the end of this year, I don't know if it's possible, but we'll see what we can do. Now, what I meant by I wanted a video like this, my friend Jordan or Espresso or E. coli Espresso, depending on how long you followed him, but Jordan was at the event, and I was looking for someone who has been at the event, who played the game, who came home, put their thoughts together, and just gave a simple answer. How good is the multiplayer? So his video is called So Is Battlefield 6 Multiplayer Any Good? And then he goes through everything, gives his opinion on it. And that's kind of what this channel is based off of, opinion on video games. So perfect style of video. Let's see what Jordan has to say about it. Great tunes, great tunes.
Battlefield 6 is now out there and in the wild.
Look how beautiful this game is.
Seen the game, not nearly as many have played it.
Yes.
Earlier, I was a part of the game.
By the way,
got about 8 hours of game.
I already got my beta key, so we will be playing on the 7th. I think it goes live at like 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to stream when it goes live because it's the same day as Season 5. So we're going to stream Battlefield 6 in the morning and then Season 5 for Call of Duty in the afternoon. Compare them. Why not?
Gameplay under my belt over the last 2 days. So today I wanted to share my experiences, feelings, and impressions about Battlefield 6 multiplayer. The beta itself is next weekend, so
how many people were there?
I encourage you to check it out for yourself if you're at all interested in the game, as my impressions are only that of my own. Your hands-on game is how you feel, so perhaps my impressions can be a guide to maybe what to expect, but as always, get hands-on time before.
Is Jordan the world's greatest?
One thing that right away is nice that we can discuss is the beta where you get hands-on. I'm honestly a huge fan of and incredibly surprised that the beta has zero component that is reliant on pre-orders.
Smart move.
This is EA after all we're talking about, and they just said free money be damned. It's kind of like they saw those calls for no pre-orders and were like, oh, okay, that's fine. The beta itself will have an early access period, but for those that signed up for labs at any point to my knowledge, or those that have codes from Twitch streams, so you have zero need to put any money down.
Which by the way, I got my code from Battlefield Labs because I signed up for it, never got invited to anything. They gave everyone who signed up for Battlefield Labs a code.
Out for that early access period. That's a good start in my opinion. Personally, I think that kind of shows confidence in their product that they're not worried about that at all. Overall, before we get into specific portions of the gameplay itself, I think a big general
I think Jordan might be the greatest player ever.
The fence this year with Battlefield 6, and for a lot of Battlefield purists, that might not be exactly what you want to hear because it's on a wide appeal approach.
Yes, that's true.
How I see it, at least this year. What I kind of feel like is this is their swing back at Call of Duty. Back in 2019 with
Modern Warfare 2019, by the way, historically when games do this, it's not a good thing. And that's kind of what they did with 2042 is they took a swing at Call of Duty. But it wasn't Battlefield. This is Battlefield Call of Duty, essentially. Like with the small team game modes, with using all the weapons on all classes, this is like as close to a Battlefield Call of Duty crossover as you can get without swinging too close to Call of Duty. Because as soon as you go too close to Call of Duty, you go X-Defiant, you go Splitgate, you go any of these games, it just never works, it seems.
And COD was kind of like, hey, Battlefield fans, yeah, we know you're a bit jaded right now, so come try out our big map mode and ground war. And then this year, with COD fans being jaded, it kind of feels like the inverse of that. It feels like they're attempting to please the old school fans, but with their large combat conquest, breakthrough, and rush experiences, but with the addition of so much more focus on smaller scale stuff too, even down to the fundamentals of the current choice for locked versus unlocked weapons, it appears they're trying to take those perspectives into consideration too, making a wider appealing game while still having the core elements thereof. Now, whether or not that will be too much to handle with a
campaign, by the way, it was actually kind of what they were doing with Modern Warfare 2019.
In regards to what playstyle you have and a battle royale later, we'll have to wait and see. But I think for now, it's enjoyable to consider. You can find enjoyment in basically any type of player that you are. Now, talking about the core gameplay itself, one of the big things they're focusing on this year is the kinesthetic combat. This is a new set of mechanics that they're grouping into the core fundamentals of the game that I do think actually plays rather nicely. Things like combat rolls, reviving, and dragging is a really big help here, getting teammates out of dangerous situations and getting them back into the fight. The hitch a ride feature I think is just kind of funny. Peaks and leans are something that can help give you a little bit more information without having to go into a firefight, and weapon mounting is something that I'm probably not going to use, but it is something that will give you a bit more mitigation. Your other core mechanics like movement is back to a classic feeling to a degree. I don't want to say that it's back to like 3 and 4 levels of movement, but it is something that
It seems faster. It seems like they took the Battlefield 3 and 4 movement and were just a little faster.
Get rid of that sort of all over the place 2042 mentality that we had the past couple of years. There is no tac sprint, so that's definitely something that I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that was in labs for a little while, but is no longer there. This is more akin to older games now, bringing that pacing down, kind of. If you're watching footage, I think it depends on what you're looking at. Modes like domination and smaller scale things, you won't notice the pacing being slow. It might actually feel fast because of the scale of the maps that you're on.
Yeah, so one thing that I think Call of Duty fails at, I'm just going to say straight up fails. I was trying to think of the word that I was going to use for this, but I think fails, is Call of Duty essentially built the perfect system to have infinite maps for free. You make a big battle royale map, or in the case of Battlefield, big maps, or in the case of Modern Warfare 2019, ground war maps, and then you design them in a way where they can be easily sectioned off into smaller maps. And by the way, this is nothing new. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 did this with wager matches. A lot of people forget this. They took big maps and then sectioned them off into smaller maps. And Call of Duty could have done this all the way back in Modern Warfare 2019, and they kind of did. But like when they introduced like new maps like Ashika Island, for example, if you would have just taken some of the locations, cordoned them off, and made them maps, they should have been able to pump out maps incredibly quickly. Battlefield 6, what they have done here, when they showed off the big maps, there was clearly cordoned off sections for smaller maps, like he's playing on right now in a game of domination, which basically, when they put out one new big map, all of a sudden they might have 4 to 5 new small maps, which is perfect.
The sort of tight corridors you're going in and out of. But larger scale, conquest, breakthrough, rush and all, crossing those no man land situations will feel painfully slow, just hoping the entire time you don't get shot at. So to me, I think this is a solid middle ground, something that you can feel your place in the world as a result. Also, personal preference, I am a big fan of no tac sprint here in this. I do think that that is a nice addition here to what we have for the gameplay.
Apparently there will be tac sprint in Black Ops 7, by the way.
Well, the maps, there are 2 distinct types. You have your large scale and your small scale. These end up being utilized by combat zones. The smaller scale maps, your domination, team deathmatch, squad deathmatch, and the like, all come out of the larger scale.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
Entirety, but they're taking subsect of those maps and making them play at a smaller scale. They mentioned explicitly that these combat zones are meticulously tested, and honestly, I do kind of believe them from the first few hours here of this. While I feel like they're recognizable, the flow does change entirely when it's the only portions of the map you have available to you. The problem I have with things, if we're taking direct comparisons, is that COD does this with Warzone maps to either make ground war maps or sometimes even just 6v6 scale stuff out of it. To me, especially down to the smaller scale stuff, it doesn't feel like it's a space that lives on its own. Those maps often don't play super well. They play kind of a bit awkwardly, I think. But
I'm trying to think of like a good example of a map that did that. Like you had Vacant on Battle Royale. I can't throw some maps down in the comments, because for the most part, I think it does work. But like Avalon did it this year, right? But we didn't get the big map of Avalon, so you can't compare.
These ones, they do feel like their own maps. Albeit, I'm not a fan of the domination, squad, and team deathmatch cutout of Liberation Peak, but that's because it's a literal vertical scaling thing, so one side is genuinely 2 to 3 stories higher than the other side spawns. So fundamentally, it just creates this imbalance that is really hard to break out of a spawn trap once that's initiated. However, Empire State, Iberian Offensive, both of those play way better, I think, and are actually very enjoyable, I think. Now, we'll come back to that a little bit later, but that's my personal take. Modes, despite being the same maps, the modes, and the scale of them, I do think adequately felt different. Wholly different experiences based off of what you're playing. If you're playing Conquest, you're going to, of course, have a lot more chaos around you, a lot more things happening, and a lot more you have to keep your head on a swivel for, as opposed to, say, simply playing Team Deathmatch or Domination. Some modes in particular I do think need work, which we'll come back to in a bit for some of my complaints with this. But those come down to things like spawns, but for the most part, it's a formula that these maps, Conquest, Breakthrough, Rush, have been covered and historically nailed down, so it's not...
This is what's interesting. Through all of this reveal, I haven't heard one person say a single bad thing about Battlefield 6. And that's just dumb. Like, that's unrealistic. There's no way that everything's good about this game. So to hear him say have some negative things, it's good, because if you just say, oh, everything's great, okay, then just launch the game now.
something that I'm really too sort of worried about, I guess. But anyways, your weaponry. Weaponry is, of course, a huge part of Battlefield. How do they feel? Personally, I thought it felt very smooth. I felt like a lot of the weapons had different character to them. Some weapons we'll come back to again, but for the most part, a lot of the weapons did feel a little bit different, offered sort of different availabilities for playstyles, and maybe exactly what you wanted to get out of a bit more.
That was bad aim there, Jordan. Speaking of weapons, that was bad aim.
Something that's a bit more easier to control, something that may have a bit more recoil, but does have a nice payoff. That kind of stuff is seen throughout the couple of weapons we've seen in this beta. The create a class, and I guess the customization of weapons more so, is what I find to be.
I find it like, how didn't Call of Duty think of this system? It's essentially the pick 10 system with your weapon. Now, just be clear, for Call of Duty, I think this wouldn't quite work because I think the best Call of Duty create a class system is a pick 10 system. They could do this pick 100 system in Call of Duty, but include grenades, include perks and everything like that, and I think it'd be even better.
Be a really nice middle ground here with this. This system that is in place allows you to have a sort of pick 100 system where you have 100 points cumulatively across your weapon build. You have attachments that range anywhere from what I think I saw was 5 points to 35 points. But this allows you to min-max attachments in a number of different ways. You can either min-max on the quantity of those weapon attachments, allowing for every single attachment slot to be filled, or you can min-max to the impactful attachments, or somewhere in between those. But it's entirely up to you, and I think is a nice way to balance this as opposed to just having X amount of attachments available. There were a few standouts in the weaponry department, but again, we'll come back to that in a second. One thing that I think ties nicely into the weaponry, but also the game at large, is the sound design. I think of the real-time gameplay experiences you'll see in the game. If you play with a quality...
Yeah, I noticed this just in the reveal, watching people play. The guns sound unbelievably good.
Headset or speaker system, you're going to notice the audio. From the echo of the sniper fire, the roar of jets flying overhead, the booming depth of grenade explosions, it doesn't really matter. You're going to feel that audio, and that's a huge part of it, I think. With a game that attempts to nail the scale of combat like Battlefield, I feel like audio is a huge part of making that happen, making you feel small in the grand scheme of things. And I think that they really nailed it with this one. Weaponry, again, plays into that. Everything else about the environment, really did enjoy with that also. And finally, before we get to the things that I do think need some work, I think the aesthetic is definitely going to be something that helps them out big time. I think one of those things that this game has going for it right now is the industry as a whole isn't really that grounded. Like, there's not many AAA shooters out there that have a military grounded perspective. Now, will that last?
How weird is that when you really think about it? Like, who remembers when every single shooter game that came out was a World War II shooter? Like, back in the day, it was like Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, we're storming Normandy every single time. And then eventually it switched to modern shooters, and then you had the Counter-Strike, you had Call of Duty, you had Battlefield, all of which were set in like the modern times. And then they went all futuristic, and then now, like, it seems like either we have like a cartoon game, which is now Black Ops 6 somehow, which is a game that takes place in 1991. How strange is that one? And then you have like a Fortnite, and then you have like even the finals is in like this like unrealistic game show style thing. So how is it that we have a ton of shooters, but none are realistic military shooters? And yeah, there's some. Like, I mean, there's some, but like massive multiplayer like that, not really.
But it's a badge of honor right now that I think that they can wear, at least for the moment. Now, Dexerto even got a quote on it with some of their interviews with Vince Zampella and Byron Beatty, where they said, "The thing we can say, we are a military shooter in modern times." So I think they know what they're saying with that. I think they know what people want, and I think they're hopefully going to lean into that here long term. And I think that's going to be a big win for the most part for a lot of people that do feel jaded by, say, direct comparisons of Call of Duty that have stuff that has abandoned any sort of cohesive aesthetic of the game itself. But anyways, let's talk about systems that I think need work. I liked a lot of this game, but I do think there's a lot of stuff that could be worked on.
Okay.
I'm going to miss absolutely some stuff, but the things that stood out to me through my gameplay sessions, spawns are absolutely something that need work. And I do think that this is
okay. So that'll also be something like, I haven't heard a single person talk about this. I believe Jordan, when he says this, you saw that clip at the very beginning where he was just watching the other team spawn, and I think he got 10 kills in a row, like within like 3 seconds. Clearly that is going to be an issue. It is a lot of the times going into beta. It's what they do moving forward with that after that'll be interesting.
That should be mentioned. It's more so for the smaller modes. While I did notice that in Conquest and Breakthrough there were some spawns that were less than ideal and were probably just poor timing or something like that, spawns in Domination and Squad Deathmatch I think were exceptionally bad. Domination, like I talked about, Liberation Peak, there is truly a point in that Domination match where you can look directly into someone's spawn and see them spawning in your
Oh my god.
That shouldn't be happening, and of course, with that being something that map in particular is again such a vertically scaled map differently, 2 to 3 stories of elevation difference, I'd say, from one side to the other. You really make that hard to break out of if you don't have a team that is consciously pushing out of that together.
Call of Duty always takes a lot of flack for their spawns, but with small maps, it is very hard. It is hard to, number one, not make it so the spawns flip too much, but then aren't too sticky. And then at the same time, don't spawn you too far away from someone where it takes too long to get into a gunfight. It's something that Call of Duty struggles with every year. And sometimes they're still really bad. And it'll be very interesting to see what Battlefield does this year with their spawns and if they can get them right in the small modes in particular.
Or vice versa, if it is multiple parties playing and communicating together. This is something that I think that these need some work. Weapon balance is also not the best. We talk about how a lot of the weapons did have character and sort of their own profiles. So for the most part, every weapon is pretty solid, but there are 2 to 3 weapons that are just absolutely busted.
Every game has
Even
this.
in our reveal event, like only 8 hours of total play, there were already games that the kill feed was like 2 to 3 guns. The shotgun with slug rounds, ridiculously broken.
Oh yeah, we saw that.
The one SMG, I forget the name off the top of my head, had 0 recoil and had an insane range for an SMG. And the LMG I used had minimal recoil and was an absolute powerhouse. Not to mention it had rounds that increased the headshot multiplier to I think 1.7, I want to say, which is absolutely nuts. I am expecting weapon tuning to be having a pass here, at least post-beta, but likely even before the beta with a week leading up to that. Right now, tuning can definitely use some work. I also think if we're talking weapons, there could be a case made for a lack of challenge with some weapons. Perhaps maybe not for me in the gameplay you'll see, as I don't play on mouse and keys only, and jumping back and forth between controller input and mouse and keys is something that it doesn't really help.
Is he saying that like the weapons do not have enough recoil? Is that what he's saying?
Conscious skill level of that, but I wanted to play on mouse and keys at this event, but a lot of the weapons do lack a punishing recoil pattern in some capacity for holding down that trigger.
So this is
normally, this isn't too much a complaint, but
this is actually one of those things that they do to make games more accessible. Is they make little things like recoil very easy so that anyone can use any weapon. There's no real skill gap or skill level to these weapons, and that is done on purpose. That was something that we saw with Modern Warfare 2019, a game that was specifically made to be accessible to everyone. And that is why they've removed red dots from the minimaps. That's why they put doors in. That's why they made the time to kill super short. That's why the weapons had like 0 recoil. It was all to make it easier for everyone to play and get more people into the game. And it works. It was a massive, massive game. And that's what it seems like they're doing with a lot of the decisions in this game as well. Putting in the smaller modes, making it so the weapons are super easy to use, making it so you can use any weapon with any class. All of those are decisions purposefully made to have more people play the game, plain and simple.
With DICE's conscious mentions of wanting a high skill ceiling, but also not scaring those players away that may not be at that skill ceiling, rewarding skill, but also, again, not trying to scare players off. I do think that something that, like, having a punishing profile on some high power weapons could be something that is a way to go about that. But anyways, that's just a side note, perhaps. I did find there was a lot of areas in the map that there were some weird bouncing, so I don't know if that was like
I could see that in
sort
the
of
last
situation
clip
where the map tries to push you off a certain place you're not supposed to be, and instead it just launches you. But that was something that was a weird thing as well. And then one thing that I think can also be made as a, not complaint, but concern is the sizing and scale of the maps overall. While I mentioned that I enjoyed a bit of everything we had, we also don't have many maps right now that you can seemingly consistently and massively strafe across the maps in things like jets. Something that aerial combat, if you're considering that, is something that I didn't get a whole ton in. Full transparency, ton of time in the jets or anything like that. But it seemed like you'd be going from end to end rather quickly, that I'm wondering if there's going to be maps in the future that do account for more of that.
Well, I believe that they said there's 9 maps at launch, and I don't think they've announced all 9. I could be wrong, but
more of that aerial combat that allows for that. Liberation Peak is the largest it feels, and even that doesn't.
Which, by the way, I think they're going to do a shadow drop like a week before the game launches, where they announce that one of the maps is Metro from Battlefield 3.
Really feel like it could be proper scaling. But with things like Operation Firestorm returning, however, maybe again it's just one of those things that right now it's not showing off the biggest maps, the largest scale of that combat. But anyways, beyond that, I think overall, a lot of what we saw today signals confidence in their game. Whether or not it's confidence that we have as consumers, it seems like they are confident in their game, which is definitely nice. No pre-orders for an early access to a beta, definitely a nice start.
Huge.
Gameplay that looks to take direct aim at their competition with modes gearing towards smaller combat and aesthetics of mill sims. The return of Portal, I honestly think, is an insanely cool thing, by the way. We didn't even
So when Jordan was at the event after the reveal, he said that like we didn't get to use this or play it or anything, but like based off of like the feedback people were given, they think this thing is going to be huge. This Portal, we'll see if it will be, but
talk about that because it's not a part of the gameplay we had today, but that's something I want to expand upon in the future that I think has so much replayability potential for the game at large. But that I think is just super cool as well. And also, it seemed to focus on the little things a lot too. One thing that I noticed, and this is just kind of going off on a tangent at this point, unless I'm gaslighting myself, one thing that I remember a developer telling me was the tech for the redeployment cameras was basically rebuilt from the ground up for this game. Of course, those types of things have been in prior titles,
Okay.
but according to, I think it was David Serland back in April with a developer discussion that I had, that system was of course from prior games, but it was like an estimation. It wasn't the most accurate thing here that you'd see in those prior games. However, in this, again, unless I'm misremembering, that's the actual player camera from a third-person shoulder cam perspective.
That's pretty
like
crazy.
Real time, entirely what they're seeing is what's on your screen. And if that holds up, that's genuinely so cool to me that they're that confident they're working on things like that. So, in short, is Battlefield 6 any good? Personally, I really enjoyed my time with it. I'm excited to get hands-on once again with the beta, but here's the thing. I still wouldn't pre-order it if I were you. Just because I enjoyed it may not mean that you do. What's beautiful though, for a third time, is that lack of care for pre-orders. So jump into the game, try it out for yourself. 2 weekends of the open beta, perhaps a full 2 weekends if you can get a code from labs or from creators streaming it. But if you do, it's just the perfect time of no stakes to see if you enjoy the game or not. Personally speaking, I'm excited to jump in and be excited for another shooter again. I'm happy to see people enjoying it seemingly so far from what I saw from the comments earlier in the video and also in the stream itself and from socials, but let me know your thoughts down below. Try it out for yourself, drop your thoughts. If you guys enjoyed the video, you found it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. If you're new to the channel.
I liked it, Jordan. I'm glad that you went in and gave some negatives as well, because if I remember back in the day when I did play small modes, I think it was in Bad Company, I could be wrong. The spawns were really bad in those games, and when they don't get something like that right, it feels like those modes end up just becoming an afterthought, which I don't think is the case here whatsoever. But to hear that is like, okay, this is something we need to pay attention to in the beta. Weapon balance is always going to be a problem. And then we'll see what like the server connection and game feels like when they're not all playing from one location. I think that's a really big thing that nobody is talking about at these things, is those places you're playing are designed to have good connection, are designed to play well. You're playing on rigs designed for that game. So like once like we have it out in the wild and the beta comes out, I think we're going to get a better idea of how this is going to perform at launch. And I'm very curious how it does. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but it would be the best thing for Call of Duty would be for Battlefield to outsell it this year. I don't think it's ever happened before. Even when like Battlefield 1 and Infinite Warfare, I still think Infinite Warfare outsold it. But could it be this could be it. It could be, depending on how Call of Duty hypes up Battlefield or Black Ops 7. Also, how confusing is it that we have Battlefield and Black Ops coming out in the same year? We had Black Ops 6, now we're getting Battlefield 6. The next year is Black Ops 7, so they all sound familiar. And then on top of that, when we're getting Battlefield 6, we have GTA 6, and we just had Black Ops 6. So we have 6s, Bs, and it's tongue twister. Everything is like a damn tongue twister.